Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for being here for today's webinar, Optimizing Approvals with Power Automate Workflows. I'm Aaron Klein, the Marketing Director here at Avantico. We've got a great session lined up for you today. Senior Solutions Engineer Shoaib Memon will walk you through how to streamline your approval processes using Power Automate, and of course, the benefits of doing so. Now, Shoaib will be taking over shortly. But before we dive in, I'd just love to share with you an upcoming webinar that you won't want to miss. So on April 29th, 10 a.m. Pacific, please join us for Microsoft Licensing Mastery, EA renewals, compliance, and cost-saving tips for FY26. Gain expert insights into optimizing your Microsoft licensing, ensuring compliance, and reducing costs. I'll pop the registration link for this event in the chat here shortly. And know that we're constantly adding new webinars and events to our calendar, so stay tuned for more coming up in Q2. And on that note, if there's anything specific you'd like to see from us in the future, right, please just don't hesitate to pop that into chat. And then just one last note, Shoaib's got a good amount to get through today for you guys. So if you do have any questions as he moves through the presentation, again, just pop those questions into chat, and then we'll just answer them in the Q&A at the end of his presentation. And I think with that, Shoaib, if you want to jump in, it is all you.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Aaron. And good morning to everyone. My name is Shoaib Memon. I'm a Senior Solutions Engineer at Avantico. I'm delighted to welcome you all to today's presentation. We have some exciting agenda lined up for you all that will provide you with a comprehensive understanding of workflow approvals with Power Automate and its various use cases. So we will basically start with an introduction to Power Automate for people who are not familiar with Power Automate. We will explore the basics and the potential of this powerful tool. Following that, we will dive into some of the approval workflow use cases, showcasing real-world scenarios where Power Automate can streamline approval processes. Next, we will discuss workflow business events and how they can be leveraged to trigger automated actions. We will then move on to workflow configuration and provide you with some insights into setting up and customizing workflows to meet your business specific needs. One of the key topics in this webinar today that we will cover is the approval sequencing strategies. Over there, we will explore different approaches to managing approval sequences effectively. And we will also have a demo session to give you hands-on experience of Power Automate in action. Furthermore, we will also highlight business value and benefits that you will get out of this solution, emphasizing how it can drive efficiency and productivity in your organization. We will also look at the approvals engine and how it performs in different platforms like Teams and Outlook. And finally, we will conclude with a Q&A session where you can ask any questions you may have. So once again, thank you all for joining us today. Let's get started. So for people who are new to Power Automate, it's basically a powerful process automation tool available within Microsoft Power Platform. It helps you to streamline business processes such as communications, data collection, and decision approvals. It empowers users to build and create automated workflows for various services, including Dynamics 365, Microsoft 365, as well as other third-party applications. It provides flexibility to customize workflows tailored to business-specific needs, driving productivity and ensuring critical processes are consistent, trackable, and scalable across the organization. If you are new to the Power Automate world, you can find various out-of-box templates available for you in Power Automate for day-to-day use cases that can help you get started in your automation journey if you guys are interested. Before we move on to the next topics in the presentation, I think the big question that we need to answer here is why did we select Power Automate to replace D365 workflow approvals? And the basic reason for that is the out-of-box approval workflows in D365 are very difficult to maintain when there is a little bit of complexity involved in approval sequencing. Additionally, any changes or customizations that you need to make to your existing configuration requires heavy configuration, and then it can become a pain to manage. Whereas Power Automate is very flexible, it can allow you to easily configure and adapt workflows to fit your business needs, making it simple to scale with the increasing business complexity. The typical workflow use cases that we've seen, right? Workflow approvals are essential in many businesses as they handle significant volumes of business activities, and having efficient workflows in your organization is really important to enable faster business operations within a control and compliant framework. When you have faster approvals in your organizations, it can help with improved communications, financial and operational controls. It can help you reduce delays while enabling better business decisions. At your screen, what you're looking at, these are some of the common scenarios that we've seen with our existing clients, and then some of these scenarios that we've implemented with our existing customers. You can have workflows for invoice journals, requisition approvals, expense reports, free text invoices, credit notes. You can also have some approvals connected to master data. Uh, so if you have vendor onboarding, customer onboarding, you can connect an approval process to those business processes as well. Moving on, uh, taking a look at how this all is set up using Power Automate. So we utilize the concept of business events. Business events basically provide a mechanism for external systems to receive notifications from finance and operations. In this way, business actions can be performed in response to the business events that are occurring in your environment. When a business event occurs, users who are participating in the business actions, they basically perform uh, an action which can be a workflow action or a non-workflow action. Both type of actions can generate business events, and these business events basically trigger Power Automate workflows that uh, run your approval processes outside of D365. The way to do it is to have a business event connected to each workflow in your environment, and you can get that from the business event catalog. To access the business event catalog, you have to go to System Administration menu item in D365, where you will see a list of all of the business events in your organization, and you can also get the schema of each of the business event from the catalog. Moving on to the workflow configuration, right? The workflow configuration basically begins within D365, where you have a workflow associated with a business process. The workflow has an associated business event. When the business event occurs, it triggers a Power Automate flow. The Power Automate flow is listening to the business event, and it kicks off whenever a business event occurs. In this screenshot, as you can see, the business event will deliver a payload to Power Automate. Power Automate will use this information available within the payload, and then it will also capture some additional information from D365 using a combination of actions and conditional logic to create your approval request, build the approval request body, and then it will send out the approval request to approvers, which will then arrive in their mailbox as well as Teams chats. The response from the approvers is now taken back and written back to Dynamics 365. So you can go back to the workflow history in D365 and you can see the responses provided by the approvers. When an approval request is sent out, there are different platforms where the users can receive these approval requests. They can receive a request in Teams, which will allow them to manage and respond to approval requests quickly. They can also manage and handle approval requests through Outlook email, making it convenient for them to manage approvals alongside their regular email tasks. If users have Microsoft Teams installed on their mobile devices, this feature can also enable them to manage approval requests on the go directly from their mobile devices. Next, we have the approval sequencing strategies. This is an important discussion when you are implementing approval workflows with Power Automate, because this basically decides how your approvals are being routed to different approvers. And there are several different strategies that you can apply here. You can do a position hierarchy in D365 where you can configure FNO to route an approval to a specific user and as well as the manager of the user. So you can create a multi-level approval using position hierarchy. Uh, you can also do approvals using contact information within D365. This is a use case that we've implemented for one of our clients where they wanted the approvers to be listed on the vendors itself. So what you see on the screen is you have a vendor and you have different contacts associated with that vendor, and each contact can have a specific purpose. In this case, you can see this contact has the purpose of approver one. So you can build a hierarchy using contacts underneath accounts or vendors or customers to do your approval sequencing. Uh, you can also do approval sequencing through some complex scenarios using Excel workbooks, right? So this workbook will basically contain a list of approvers with specific sequences. Power Automate can read this file dynamically at runtime and then assign the approval request to designated approvers based on the specified sequence here in the Excel workbook. Uh, you can also combine some of these approval sequencing with complex conditional logic, as you can see here. And Power Automate will read through the file. It will recognize the conditions that you have specified, and according to the conditions, it will pick the position that it needs to send the approval request to. You can take it even further and you can have delegation capabilities associated with these workflows. And you can also configure delegation right within the Excel workbook. So without hassle of juggling into multiple systems, if you need to enable a delegation, you can just come into the Excel workbook, set this flag to yes, and you will have your delegation enabled. One other strategy that we've implemented recently, which I will be showcasing later in the demo, is you can have a singular workflow and do multiple approval processes with that workflow. So for example, let's say you have an approval workflow for free text invoices. You can repurpose that approval workflow to also work for credit notes. So on this screen, the section that I've highlighted, you can see this is an approval sequence that can run for free text invoices, meaning positive amounts, as well as credit notes, meaning negative amounts. When the approval process runs, Power Automate can recognize the type of transaction that is being executed, and it will then accordingly pick the right approvers to send the approval request to. With that, let's jump into the demo and let's take a look at how the approval processes run within Power Automate. Give me a moment to just load up the demo for you guys. So we will do a couple demos here. We will do an expense report approval and we will do an invoice journal approval here. Let's start with the expense report approval, and I'm going to show you different strategies that have been implemented for these particular use cases. So I'll start by creating a new expense report. Let's say I was attending a conference. I can link it to an existing project. In this one, we are basically going to route the approval request to the project manager of the listed project using position hierarchy in D365. Once I've created the journal or the report, sorry, I'm going to go ahead and add a few lines in there. I can even attach receipts if I need to. So whatever attachments you include in your reports, then those attachments can be sent directly to the approvers as an attachment on the approval request. You can attach a file, pictures. I'm just going to take a random picture as an attachment. Let's add another expense. Another receipt, for example. And once I'm ready, I can go back to the main screen and submit this item to workflow, this report to workflow. Once it is submitted and when the approval status changes to in review, you can go back into workflow history within D365 just to make sure your approval is kicking off. When the approval kicks off, it will then trigger a Power Automate flow, which will run the approval process and send the approval request to users in Teams and Outlook. This usually takes a few minutes to happen because there is a bit of a delay involved here. So I'll go ahead and create an invoice journal as well while we are waiting for the expense report approval to come across. Uh, so I can show you both the approvals at once when they arrive in my inbox. I'll start by creating a journal header uh, and then add a couple of lines, or maybe just a single line for this purpose is sufficient. I've created the journal line. I can also go ahead and attach a PDF invoice if I need to. That will be sent along with the approval request to the approvers. And I will go ahead and also submit this item to workflow. And let's just wait for a minute for these approval requests to come through. I guess while we wait for the approval requests to arrive in the inbox, if you have any questions so far, I can address those.
Yeah, Tonya, it looked like you had your hand up. If you want to go off mute and address your question directly to show up.
Sure. So our workflows for our journals are typically are set up with user group within FNO, and that's how we apply where those should be routed to. Can the Power Automate pick up the user groups, and can we leverage that for this process?
I believe it should be possible. It's not an approach that we've seen recently, but with some discovery, we can give you the answer for that. Uh, are you suggesting that your routing mechanism will be completely stored within D365?
In some cases, yes. So for invoice journals, payments, general journals, free text invoices, we set up regional approval groups for our different accounting regions, and it goes to a specified group of individuals for each workflow instance on the entities that apply to that region. So yeah, we do use that pretty widely through the accounting finance modules. We would use like hierarchy for like our POs instead. So we would kind of use a mix, but
Okay.
a lot of our processes through the finance modules, we do currently use the user group for approval today.
It's definitely there's something that we can look into for you. It's not an approach that we've implemented, but I don't see a reason why it should not be possible.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so I believe I've received the first approval request. Yep. So this is what an approval request would look like in Teams. Whenever you receive a new approval request, it will show up in your activity tab. And as soon as you click on it, it will take you to the right environment and it will show you the request. And here you can see the information associated with the expense report. You can also see the information from the expense lines, and the attachments that were added to the expense lines will also show up in the approval request. At the bottom here, you have the information about the requester and the approver. In this case, I am the requester, I am the approver, so not an ideal use case, but this gives you the information about the requester and the approver here at the bottom. You also have a section to provide comments, and you can go ahead and approve or reject directly from within Teams. So for this one, let's just go ahead and approve it. And as soon as I approve it, you will see that it will also send an alert to the requester notifying them this approval request was completed. Once this is completed, the request response will be written back to D365 and we will be able to see the response in the approval workflow history within D365. So if I go back here, and there's usually a delay in the write back as well. So you see it's still showing pending, but if we wait for a few more seconds, it should then say completed. And when it's completed, you can see the response that was provided by the approver from Power Automate. Now, if I go back to the main screen and I hit refresh here, you can see this approval request will be marked as approved. I'm just waiting for it to get approved. And you can see the status changed to approved. Now you can go ahead and post this expense report if you need to. I'm still waiting for the another approval request to come in for the invoice journal. As soon as that arrives, I'll bring that up.
While we wait for that to come in, Nazim actually popped a question into chat. It was asking if Microsoft is encouraging to move out of traditional workflow in D365 to Power Automate.
It's not recommended, but if you need additional flexibility and you want to cut down on your maintenance activities, then this is the way to go.
Thanks, Shoaib.
I think I may have I made a mistake. Let me just go back and recall this. I forgot to include an account in there based on which routing is happening. So apologies for that. So for the expense report, the approval routing was happening through the position hierarchy. So whoever was the project manager, in this case, I was the project manager listed on the project. So I received the approval request. But for invoice journals, we basically do the routing through ledger accounts and departments, which is why it's important to add that in here. Let me just find the right number that I'm looking for. Okay, so once I enter the ledger account, the department information, I can now go ahead and resubmit this item to workflow. And this time it should route the approval request accordingly. Now this particular scenario is going to run through two stages of approval. The previous one was a single level approval. So what I want to show you is how we can also show you the approval history in the approval request. So if you are a level 2 approver, for example, the response that was received from level 1 approver will be visible in your approval request when it shows up in your inbox. While we wait for this one to arrive, let me show you guys what the approval request would look like inside of Outlook. Now, since I've already completed this request, it gives you an alert saying that this request has already been completed. And the good part about this is, regardless of where you complete your request, this message will be shown in every single platform. So if you complete the request in Teams, you will also see it completed within Outlook. And if you do it within Outlook, then it will also send you an alert in Teams letting you know that this request was completed. So you cannot go back and complete a single request multiple times. It locks it down for you once you've taken action. Okay, so I can see this one has begun. Let's give it a couple more minutes for the approval request to arrive. And once it goes through the first level of approval, I'll show you what the approval history looks like in approval requests.
There's a couple more questions in chat, Shoaib, I think, while we wait for that to come through. We'll start with the first one. Is there a way for the to have the journal post upon approval through Power Automate? Is there a way just to push that through?
Not through Power Automate. So once you can have a batch job that runs periodically and it can pick up all your approved journals and post it. Power Automate does not have the ability to post your journals, unfortunately.
And so a longer one here from Andre. Andre's already set up an external approval workflow with D365 Finance, vendor invoice, and journal approval workflow with Power Automate. And the request for an invoice journal approval is done via an Outlook notification. However, the approver needs a D365 license to validate the invoice journal details before he can approve the workflow. The question is it possible to provide the D365 finance vendor invoice journal details to the external approver without giving him access to the D365 finance system?
So let me read that one more time.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The question's down there at the tail end.
Yeah, so the reason we send across the attachments, and that is specifically, so if you look at the approval request, right, it shows you, I want to show you a request that I already have open without wasting any further time. So let's look at this one. This is from yesterday, the journal batch approval. So in this one, any information that you want from D365 is actually readily available on your approval request right here. So what this does, and along with the attachment, they have everything they need to make the decision right here in the approval request. So they should not have the need to go back to Dynamics 365. If they have to go back, then yes, they obviously need a license to get in there. But if they do not have to go back in there, you can avoid the license completely and they can simply make the decision right here in Power Automate. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does perfectly. Thanks, Shoaib.
Okay, so this is a request from, this is a journal number, sorry, this is an invoice journal approval request. And as you can see, this is the request that was sent to the level 2 approver. So you can also see the responses received from the level 1 approval. And then it's the same thing at a high level, you see the journal header information, but you can also see the journal line information down below. And then similarly, you have an attachment, you have the requester and the approver information. You have the ability to provide comments and approve or reject directly from here. I'll go ahead and approve this one just so that I can show you what the approval history will look like in D365. So I've just completed that one, which is why it's not showing the approval yet. Okay, so now if I go to my comments section, you can see the comments from both the approvers. You can see the approval comments from level 1 approver as well as level 2 approver. And that's it for the demo. I guess if you want to see what this request appears like in Outlook, I can try and find one for you. I have a different one, but this is what it would look like inside of Outlook. And if I make a decision over here, the same request will also appear as completed from Teams. This is an example for a free text invoice, and this is what I talked about earlier, but you can have a singular approval workflow that runs for free text invoices as well as for credit notes. So what I'm going to show you next is an example of the credit note, which is running under the same approval workflow. And you can see based on the type of transaction, it can recognize what kind of approval process it needs to run, and it can bring that information accordingly. So you can have a customized body for each approval process, even though it's running through the singular approval process. And depending on your conditional logic, you can present one or the other approval request to the user, depending on the transaction type that's occurring. So with that, that brings me to the end of my demo. Let's just have a quick look at the different benefits and the business value that we get out of this solution. So using a concept of business events, we can kick off Power Automate Flow to do approvals directly in Teams or Outlook. Uh, so whether your approvers are traveling or working remotely, they can approve or reject workflows on the go without any hassle. Users do not have the need to log into Dynamics 365. They can directly make a decision within Teams or Outlook, which is why they don't need to consume any licenses. If you have a specific need for the approver to go to D365 and do some validation there, then yes, a license is required. But if they can just make the decision using the information available on the approval screen, they do not need to consume any licenses for finance and operations. Using this concept, you can provide information in more useful format for approvers, and you can also add attachments that can help them make quicker decisions. Uh, Power Automate obviously gives you flexibility to configure approval workflows with far greater ease. It also improves the speed of approvals and helps you gain better adoption from approvals within the organization. You can also enhance the experience by deploying a custom Canvas app, which I'll show you guys in a second here, to monitor and manage approvals. The need for this approval app, the way it came about is when you have an approval process that's running within Power Automate, right? You can see it writes back the information to workflow history, but it doesn't do it at every stage. So if you have a multi-stage approval process, it will only write back all of this information at the very end of the approval process. So this basically exposes a gap in the workflow history. And if you were trying to do some reporting, if you wanted to understand uh, who is pending approval for this particular journal, for example, you can't see it from the workflow history within D365, which is why we had to create a Power App, which basically is a centralized uh, view of all of your approvals that are running within your organization. This is what the Power App looks like. In here, this was designed to basically give you a bird's eye view of all of your existing approvals within your organization. So you can have approvals for invoices, expenses, credit notes, free text invoices, general ledger, everything, and you can monitor and manage all of this from this singular application. So if I wanted to look at a specific journal number, for example, I can type that in and it will show me different approval requests that have been sent to different users. You can see the requester information, the approver information. You can even read through the comments that were provided during the approval request. And this basically gives you can also filter based on approval types, right? So you can based on status, you can also look at just the approved ones, just the pending ones, and you can also search applying the filters as well. So this app helps you close the gap that is exposed through Power Automate approvals, which prevents you from viewing the approval history within Dynamics 365. With that, I just want to open the floor for questions for you guys. If you guys have any questions that we can answer for you.
Yeah, there's a couple that are stacked up in the chat right now, Shoaib. I don't know if you want me to read them out to you.
I can take a look. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Sai is the first one that hasn't been addressed.
Is it possible to reassign the work to approve by someone else after Power Automate workflow? Yes, in certain strategies, depending on the strategy that you're implementing, you can change the approver once the Power Automate approval has kicked off. So let's say you have a multi-stage approval. When it kicks off, it will send the approval request to the first approver. But if you want to modify the second level approval, you can do that. You can also enable delegation. But if you were trying to modify the first level approval, you can't do that because the request has already gone out to that approver. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, basic thing is like if the approver is on vacation or something, if we want to reroute to somebody else, then do we have to recall from D365 and use Power Automate to trigger the new workflow?
Depending on at what stage you are, right? So if, like I said, if the person that you want to enable the delegation for, if they are at the next stage and that next stage has not yet arrived, you can do so and you can continue running your current approval process. Whereas if you've already reached the stage 2 and now you want to change the approval, you will have to first recall it and resubmit it so that the new
Okay,
delegation can kick in.
thank you.
The next one that we have is from Tonya. When the journal kicked back the approver with request change or rejected, does a notification sent to the requester with any comment the approver made? Yes, when an approval request is completed, the requester receives a notification and they also see the comments that were provided. Can we see the Power Automate flow? What is being used as the trigger? Okay. So as mentioned earlier, the Power Automate workflow triggers when a business event occurs. So you have a business event connected to your workflow in D365. When that occurs, it kicks off the Power Automate flow. The next one is in the Canvas app, is there a way to filter this information by legal entity or approver name? You can add that functionality. For now, that has not been added, but you can always expand the functionalities of Canvas app with your desired requirements. Can you please show the setup of the workflow in Power Automate? I can give you a high-level rundown of what it looks like in a minute here. And the next question is D365 versus Power Automate workflow maintenance. What's the difference? Okay, the basic difference that I can tell you is when you want to make a change to D365 workflow, you most likely need a functional consultant or a developer to make that change. However, if you wanted to make a change to a I'm not talking about the config, I'm just talking about the approval sequencing. If you want to make a change in the approval sequencing for Power Automate, a business user can do that as well. But if you're talking about the modifications, you will obviously need a consultant who is experienced in Power Automate to make the config changes. However, they are very easy to do as compared to the config changes that you would need to do in D365. Okay, so are there any other questions from anyone else? If not, I can just show you guys high level what the approval process looks like in Power Automate. So this is what an approval request looks like in Power Automate. It kicks off when a business event occurs in D365. It then uses the payload available from D365 to parse that information, captures additional information from D365, like the expense header details, the resource details, report lines and all of that. It builds the body of the approval request, captures any attachments that are within D365, and using all of that, it will then create that approval request body that you guys were seeing earlier. Basically, all of this formatting happens within Power Automate. So it captures all of this information from D365 and puts it in an approval request body within this format and then sends it out to the approvers. Within Teams, you also have an app called as Approvals, where you can see all of your approvals that were sent to you or that were sent by you. You have to go to the specific environment that you're working in. And here you can see different approvals that were received for you and the different approvals that you've sent out to different users. And you can also see the status of each one of them. This basically only gives you the view from the requester and the approver's end. So if you are more of an administrator, you won't have this view for different approvals. You will only see your own approval request in here, which is why we created that approvals app, the Canvas app, that is to give you an admin view of different approvals that are running in your system. With this app, you can also see the approvals for different users, not just yourself. Obviously, you need to have the admin role in here to see the requests for other users as well.
I think you got a couple more questions there in the chat, Shoaib.
Yeah, we have a long workflow. I'm just going through them. Again, this is from Nazim. We have a long workflow with over 20 department and manager approval. After that, head of department, which are under 10, goes to CEO. That's where Power Automate makes a difference. Department keep adding each quarter. Okay, it's more of a comment. Thank you, Nazim, not a question. Is approver handling on workflows through Power Automate easier to troubleshoot and resolve internally, or will this require a consultant support? If you have a little bit of expertise in Power Automate troubleshooting, you can do it easily. I mean, it completely depends on your level of expertise if you can manage this or on your own, or you will require a consultant support. Next question is, if someone is not a user in D365 but able to approve via Power Automate, how does the user set up workflows? How the user setup works out and where user resides, like in Power Automate. Okay, so yes, you can absolutely do this even if the user is not added as a user in D365. They can still receive the approval request. All they need to have is an Office 365 license, which will give them a mailbox and access to Teams, which will provision their user, and the approval request can directly go out to their Teams or Outlook. I think that those are all the questions. Anybody else has any other questions for me?
It looks like you covered them all to me, Shoaib. Maybe one more just popped in. Oh, just a thank you. Yeah, just getting thank you and applause. Cool. Well, I think amazing presentation, Shoaib. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time.